Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining our community conversation on clemency, compassionate release, and extended limits of confinement. We are joined today by Reverend Alan Suber with the Charles McNair campaign, Jake Sussman with Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and Chris Parks, who has many titles but is also a director for the clinic at Campbell Law. And so wanted to share a little bit of background on our community conversations. This is a part of a series of events for our fifth and final annual vigil for freedom and racial justice. The purpose of this vigil is to highlight and address mass incarceration and state prison safety while providing a public, high-profile platform to uplift the needs, voices, and calls for help of mostly Black and Brown North Carolinians in prison. Our coalition intends to remain standing in collective vigil each day from yesterday, December 10th, from sunrise to sunset until January 2025. To learn more about the vigil and sign on to our letter, you can visit our website, and we'll make sure that information is dropped in the chat. So as I mentioned, our discussion today will focus on opportunities for relief from incarceration, and each of our panelists brings a wealth of experience and perspective, and we're honored to have them here. So I will pause and hand it over to Tim for any housekeeping announcements.
Hey everybody, my name is Tim. I am will be on the back end of this webinar today. If you have any questions for our panelists at all today, we will have our chat should be functional as well as our Q&A function. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop those questions in the chat, and when we have a appropriate time, we can ask those questions. Our panelists will be sure to answer those to the best of their ability. Other than that, we will have probably some follow-up emails to go out with more information about the vigil and the process throughout the whole month. But other than that, I'll just throw it back to you, Keisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, I am Keisha Millett. I'm a staff attorney with the North Carolina Justice Center, and really glad to have you all here today. So first, I would like to turn it over to Jake Sussman to share about the report that you all published and other insights you may be able to provide on the current situation.
Thank you, Keisha, and good afternoon. My name is Jake Sussman. I'm with Southern Coalition for Social Justice, where I'm chief counsel for our justice system reform team. And I want to thank the Justice Center for hosting this and other community conversations with the vigil in Raleigh starting and the end of the year fast approaching. This is a particular timely conversation to be having. I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview about the different mechanisms for bringing people home from prison and share some interesting findings based on North Carolina's experience during the height of COVID, when there was a lot of pressure brought to bear on the prison system to release people. Today, December 11th, 2024, there are over 31,000 people incarcerated in North Carolina prisons. Of those people, the vast majority are serving sentences with a final release date. That means at some point in the future, the prison system has to let them come home. There is a smaller group of people, but sizable, who were sentenced under North Carolina's old sentencing law, which means that the parole commission is going to be the decider in whether those folks get to come home. There's another group of people, about 1,600 people, who are serving a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, which means at this moment, the prison system is not planning to release them. And then in North Carolina, we have about 136 people on our death row. What I'm going to talk about today, just sort of broadly, are some of the different mechanisms that exist currently in our state to bring people home from prison before their sentence has expired, which could apply to any of those groups that I just mentioned. And I think it's worth mentioning that history, research and experience, which perhaps some of you have directly or through a loved one, tells us that we send far too many people to prison for too long. And I've been doing this work for over 25 years, and I've never been more certain in the correctness of research that shows prison sentences rarely serve any public safety objective, and that the threat of prison sentences, especially longer ones, don't deter criminal activity. Lengthy prison sentences rarely serve any rehabilitative purpose. And so this research that tells us that efforts to shorten prison sentences that are already too long to serve any beneficial purpose will have no negative effect on the outcomes of public safety, and importantly, provide second chances, reunite families, and help communities heal. In terms of how we might bring people home from prison before those sentences have expired, there are essentially four ways this might happen. One is through the courts, by way of an appeal, or more often by way of something called a motion for appropriate relief, where a court can release someone if they find their conviction or sentence is unlawful. Another way is through the Parole Commission, which is now called the Post-Release Supervision and Parole Commission. For those eligible for parole, the Parole Commission can grant parole to enable someone to come home. The prison system can also help bring people home. Under North Carolina law, the prison system can facilitate an early release or reentry of someone. There are things called discretionary time credits to help speed up a scheduled release. The prison system has something called extended limits of confinement, or ELC, which allows certain people under certain conditions to serve out the remainder of their sentences outside of prison while still under some sort of supervision. So these are not technically released from prison. I put in air quotes according to the prison, but it does allow somebody to come home. And then this prison can also support what was known as compassionate release based on medical reasons and other factors. That's something Chris Parks will talk more about. And finally, sort of the fourth way mechanism for release is the governor. Under the North Carolina Constitution, the governor right now, Governor Cooper, has the power to commute anyone's sentence. It's an awesome power. It used to be used more frequently. Over the last 40 years, governors have rarely used it, but there has been an uptick in focus on the governor's clemency power. And I know this is something Reverend Suber will speak more about, and is really what is at the core, I think, of what the vigil is demanding of the governor. As you may know or can imagine, despite these different mechanisms for bringing people home, it's difficult to do. And it's easier to get somebody into prison than it is to get them out, especially before the original sentence is up. And this is despite the fact that bringing people home early from prison can be done safely and effectively. Southern Coalition for Social Justice recently published a report that I believe is in the chat called Safe Return, North Carolina's Experience with Bringing People Home Early from Prison, which examined what happened during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Using many of the tools I just mentioned over a 17-month period from February of 2021 through July of 2022, over 13,400 people came home early from North Carolina prisons, which is unprecedented. Some of these folks came home days early, others came home years early, but overall it was a staggering success under any definition of success. Those total figures were never actually really reported by the prison or given a whole lot of attention. There was a lot going on with the pandemic at that particular time. And, I think it's probably fair to say that the prison system didn't really want to call much attention to the fact that basically a third of the prison population was able to be brought home, again, earlier than their original sentences. What that 17-month period made clear was that North Carolina has the tools to do this and to do it safely. There were no negative effects on public safety. So I would recommend that report to you all. We highlight a number of stories in there, provide a bunch of a deeper dive into these different mechanisms, and offer some recommendations, the most basic of which is that the state of North Carolina can and should continue to release people early from prison. And so with that overview, I will pass along to Chris to talk a little bit more in detail about compassionate release. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jake. That was a really terrific overview. And thank you, Keisha and Tim, for continuing this conversation about how we help folks in prison to come home. I am talking today about medical release of inmates. Part of my job is I work on the policy team at Disability Rights. And in that role, I've worked with the legislature to try to increase the availability of early release for medical reasons or compassionate release. In the summer of 2023, there was a provision added into the budget that made some positive changes that would allow more people to qualify for medical release. One of the things it did was lower the age to 55 years old. But there is a lot more that we need to do. And so I think that's why this conversation is so important. Keisha has put up in the chat the statute if anyone wants to follow along. But basically, the new law says that anyone who's 55 years and suffers from a chronic infirmity, illness, or disease that's progressed such that the inmate is medically incapacitated and is also determined to pose either no risk or low risk to public safety, is eligible. And so the statute includes some definitions of what is permanently and totally disabled, terminally ill, or geriatric. And one of the things we tried to do was make this definition a little more user-friendly. To those of us who have been working on this, the biggest challenge right now is that prison staff doesn't seem to understand that a broader group of people could be eligible for this, because medical release allows release of people who are either permanently and totally disabled or terminally ill or geriatric. And so it seems like the prison is still looking at just people who are terminally ill. And so what generally happens is by the time someone gets a diagnosis and are determined to be terminally ill and all the paperwork goes through, there very few people are still even alive to be able to be released. Normally, I think it's maybe 17 or 20 people a year who are released. So one of the things we need advocacy groups, family members, and others to really work on is to help spread the word about this avenue and to advocate with people to include a broader definition. For the folks that worked on this, there was a group that went to talk to folks at Central Prison about the process and how it works and what they needed to make the process work better. The person who's in charge of this at Central Prison's name is Greg Holloway, and he works with social workers in the prison system, but also social work students from around the state to put these together. What he identified as the biggest challenges is putting together these packages is very labor intensive. So he said he could really use more full-time staff, even though he has the social work students. Once people are identified, they have to find a place to go. They have to find, get signed up for Medicaid and other benefits. And so that is really labor intensive, putting together the home plan. So he would like to have more full-time staff. That's something that the legislature could include in a bill, is money for that, or it's just something that the prison could do with their budget. And he also said that they really need a lot earlier identification of people who qualify for medical release. And that's something that I wanted to talk a little bit about with this group, because it's something that I think we can all help with. So to talk just a little bit about the process for how medical release works, the process can be initiated by anyone who just fills out the form. So this could be a family member, a lawyer, an advocate, or someone from the prison. In the past, it's mostly been prison staff who's filled out the form, but anyone can do it. That form then goes to the parole commission, who approves or denies it for planning. Now, Mr. Holloway from Central Prison wasn't really sure what went into this approval or denial process, but it's probably the parole commission determines if the person is eligible based on their crime. Because right now, people with A, B, and C crimes are not qualified for early medical release. Once the parole commission approves this for planning. Then a team, which includes the hospital director, the medical director, and Greg Holloway at Central Prison, are notified, and they begin the planning process. So again, that includes finding a facility to transfer the person, to coordinate Medicaid and other benefits. And it takes weeks very often to get all this together, even with the staff that they have. One of the things he said is most nursing homes will not take people with an arson conviction. And so there are so many specific limits on who can go where, that if the person isn't going home to be cared for by a loved one, that provides a lot of just immediate challenges. Once all this is done, that team sends the paperwork back to the parole commission to approve or deny. But what the parole commission has told us, and what Mr. Holloway at Central Prison has told us, is that at this stage, most people are approved. But again, it's only really a handful of people each year who get that far down the line. Let's see. Probably the biggest challenge, he said, really is the facility placement, if the person isn't going home to a loved one. And so one of the things that we are really trying to improve is the network of people who can work on this and of resources. There's a great group called Medical Justice Alliance. It's not in North Carolina, but it's a nationwide group, and they provide lots of support for these kinds of planning challenges. They also provide physicians who can come in and make recommendations for people. And so for those of you who are advocating for specific individuals to get a medical release, they're a great resource. For advocacy, that's one thing that we would love partners on, is to increase people in North Carolina who can either offer physician services or help with placements at facilities. Another thing that will be really important in increasing the number of people who can benefit from this change in the law is to go back to the legislature and try to get more people qualified to begin with. We talked about, when this original provision got passed, that it would be great to allow people with B and C felony convictions to be included for consideration. Because the provision 2 years ago was sort of stuck into the budget, the legislative leadership didn't really feel it was appropriate to add such a big change like B and C's. But that is something that we really are going to work on this year. And I have students who are interested in helping make a pitch to legislators to include those folks. It doesn't mean that people with B's and C felonies will automatically be approved, but they will at least be qualified to be approved. Right now, there's about 1,936 people who have convictions that qualify them for this kind of relief. And those are people over 55. So that's really a great number of people who could qualify. But there's 2,825 people who are over 55 who might otherwise qualify, but they have convictions that don't allow them to be considered. So that'll be a big improvement to get more people considered for this relief, if we can get that legislation changed. One of the other main things that we need to do is really increase the knowledge about this program and about the change in the definitions with Department of Adult Corrections staff. And so folks at the Wilson Center and other groups that have worked on this are setting up meetings with George Pettigrew, who is a secretary at the Department of Correction, to try to figure out how we can help them educate staff so that they can more frequently recommend people in prison for this early release program. So I think that'll be a really important thing. There's a great memo out from FAM, the Families Against Mandatory Minimums, that talks about how other states look at these definitions and how they can include more people based on the definition of who is geriatric or who is terminally ill. And we think that the definition that North Carolina has can be expanded to not just people who a physician is willing to say may die in the next 9 months, but to more people with long-term illnesses. So that's what's sort of been going on with medical release. If there's anyone who has questions about how to get involved or how to learn more about the legislation that we're going to propose in the upcoming legislative session, I'd love to talk to anyone about it anytime. So thank you again so much, Keisha, for letting me talk about this program for a little bit. And I will turn it over to Reverend Suber to talk about all he's been doing for Charles McNair.
Yes, thank you so much, Kristen and Jake, my fellow co-panelists, and also Keisha and Tim. Thank you so much for organizing this conversation. As Kristen said, my name is Reverend Alan Suber. I pastor Faith Forward Baptist Church in Lexington. I've only been in Lexington for 5 years, born and raised in South Carolina. So I'm a transplant to North Carolina after going to school. I'm involved in several things, but one thing that I am involved in is the advocacy group for Charles McNair, which I came on board 2 years ago after a team had been involved in advocating for him for the last 4 years. We officially, 2 years ago, formed the Advocates for Charles McNair, which is a 501c3, where we have been advocating for him ever since. But just a little information about who Charles is, his life, his story. Charles McNair is a gentle, humble man, as humble as anyone could be, one who takes his faith very seriously. He's someone who attends chapel on the regular. He is one that, though when he was incarcerated, he went in without a GED. Since then, he has acquired his GED. He also acquired other certifications. Many of his other inmates, friends, respect him. Even prison employees respect him. Charles, in a field work that he was doing in Raleigh sometime early this year or last year, one of the supervisors picked him to talk with Todd Ishii about the conditions of the prison. So you can see the type of influence that Charles has. But the reality is he has been serving behind bars for 45 years. In 1979, November 26, 1979, Charles was arrested. He was woken up from his sleep through the police beating him. And he was accused of raping and robbing a 57-year-old white woman. There is no evidence that proved that through our investigation, through us talking with Charles, and him being very detailed about what happened 40-something years ago. We have found that there's no evidence to prove that Charles had raped or robbed this 57-year-old white woman. What is true is that Charles was engaged in a consensual relationship with this 57-year-old white woman where she pursued him. Charles, who had to drop out of school to support his family, support his mom and his siblings. He was a baggage handler at a country club in Lexington, and that's where this 57-year-old white woman approached him. And from that, they engaged in a relationship. But you can imagine in the 70s, especially in Davidson County, racial tensions were very high. This is the county where the KKK had their own parade downtown. This is the county is known for the Confederate statue that was just removed a few years ago. But the statue was in the center of Center Street. The statue was the seal on the Lexington city seal. It was racism has been embedded in this county and city. So you can imagine during that time, during a high racial time, it was considered, for lack of a better word, a sin for a white person, in particular, white woman, to be involved with an African American male. And during this time, it was very easy for African American men to be convicted, to be arrested and convicted, some even killed, based off an accusation that they raped and robbed a white woman. So 1979, that's what this 57-year-old woman did. She cried rape and robbery, and pretty much Charles was beaten. He was woken out of his sleep from police clubs. He was arrested and put in jail. And pretty much Charles, indeed, he pled second degree rape. And the reason why he did that and not first degree rape is because if he did first degree, he would have been sentenced to death row. Butch Zimmerman, the legendary DA of Davidson County during that time, was known for his very creative way that he would, he was a very creative prosecutor. He was very creative of how he would trial a case. This was a prosecutor that was known to have a notebook talking about his ancestry grandparents and how they would mistreat their slaves. He was known for inviting other law students to his house where he would read from this notebook of how they would treat their slaves. So Butch Zimmer was known for sentencing anyone to the death penalty, to death row. However, though Charles could not read, could not write, and you could tell when you look at the form to which he signed that Charles could not really interpret what they were handing to him. However, he had enough sense to know that if I plead first degree, I'll be sentenced to death. So I'm going to plead second degree. And since then, 40-something years later, really 40 years, no one has really known who Charles is, with the exception of his family and those in his immediate community who knew who he was. But no one really has digged in to really try to uncover the truth of his case that really was forgotten by the city. And also many people didn't know. When we started this advocacy group and our work, many people wanted this story to remain hidden. We've received a lot of questions. Why would you uncover the dark side of Lexington, this dark period in Lexington? Shouldn't we allow the family to rest and not have to relive this horrible day? That was many of the questions that was being asked of us. However, we felt it was right and just to make sure that Charles's story is known, not just in his immediate community, but also statewide. So for the last 4 years, we've done several things. We've done protests, we've done vigils. As a matter of fact, we just finished having a vigil November 26th to reflect on 45 years of his incarceration. We've quite naturally met with many state officials, people such as our state Jarvis, Senator Jarvis, Steve Jarvis, as well as Eric Fletcher and several others. We've also had a freedom banquet. We've also had a freedom concert. For the last few years, we've done a phone blitz where we challenged several people to make phone calls to the governor. I believe Keisha posted in the chat the number that you can call the governor's office, as well as emails. As far as we've been told, that our emails about Charles McNear is probably one of the most circulated emails they've ever received. That there are pages and pages of emails directed towards Clemency for Charles McNear, and also our phone calls. As I understand it, they have files on top of files of recorded phone calls and messages about citizens advocating for Charles. But if anything, that definitely we will want you to know um, is that Charles is one who's doesn't have any anger in his heart. For something like this, you'll think anyone would have anger in their heart after serving 40 something years for a crime you didn't do. You would think someone would have anger in them, and he doesn't. Very gentle, very loving. He always sends appreciation and notes of thanking his advocacy group, thanking his community, thanking even individuals who may not know him, he'd never spoken to, but the fact that they participate and advocate for him, he always sends a message of thank you and appreciation. Even though he lost his mother while being incarcerated. He lost his grandparents while being incarcerated. He lost his father while being incarcerated. He lost 3 siblings by being incarcerated. All this happened while he was behind bars. And today, the only thing he wants to do is come home. He wants Governor Cooper to use his power, the use of a pen and signing of a name to finally release Charles to come home. Certainly, I could go on and on about the many people that have joined in this fight. He has reporters. He has supporters from Jumpstart instructor at Davidson County. He also has supporters from the prison ministries. Our city has done a resolution, the first of its kind. Our city council sent a resolution to Governor Cooper. We also have a clergy letter where clergy, both black and white, came together and signed a letter in support of Charles. So definitely we see this massive support and massive push for Governor Cooper to do the right thing. Our slogan has been 43 years too long, 44 years too long, and now 45 years too long. And we've been saying it over and over again. This is inhumane. This is wrong. This is unjust. And myself, who indeed identify as a Christian pastor, to me, this does not follow in the teachings of Jesus Christ, to whom I serve, nor does it represent the teachings that Governor Cooper says that he also follows behind. So our encouragement to all those who are listening to join into this fight. Certainly there's several names we could uplift. Charles McNear is one name, but we feel that his name is worthy. This Charles McNear is worthy for us to be a part of this fight for him. So we ask that you call, write emails, call your officials, and get involved in this fight to send Charles McNear home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Suber. And towards the end of the call, will have an opportunity for those who would like to take action and go ahead and call the governor's office. And just want to thank all 3 of you for sharing your insights. I think being able to get a sense of the current landscape and understand and hear that as we understand sentencing as it's set up right now, it is not serving a purpose of our community safety, and to learn about different opportunities for access to relief. Also hear more about compassionate release, the statute that there are it sounds like over 1,000 people who are currently eligible under the current statute and more who could be eligible, and that there is a need for support around people being able to navigate that complex process. And then finally hearing about advocates for Charles McNair and the circumstances that Mr. McNair faced and how people are continuing to advocate for his freedom 45 years later. So thank you all for joining us and sharing about that. So we have a setup right now. Although we are webinar style, we do still want to hear from folks in the audience. And I have a few questions that I'd love to hear people answer if you'd like to. And before I do that, I will turn it over to Tim to do a brief poll with the audience.
All you should be seeing a poll launch any second now. It's just asking a question that is just getting to ask, what your familiarity with our with justice is, and specifically with compassionate release and limits of confinement, motion for appropriate relief, and your familiarity with clemency. So that poll should be launched. I'll probably leave it open for about a minute or so, but during that time, go ahead and answer it. But I'll turn it back over to Keisha while that poll is running. I'll close it shortly. But yeah, if anyone has any questions for us, feel free. You should have the ability to raise your hand virtually. And if you raise your hand, I will be able to come through, unmute you, and let you ask your question to our lovely panelists.
Thank you. And you also are welcome to, if you have any comments that you don't want to say out loud, but would like to share either in the Q&A or in the chat, please let us know, and we'll do our best to also share those aloud for the group. So this is a first, before we get into questions for the panelists, wanted to ask questions of the group, and panelists are also welcome to answer. So for those of you who are currently on the call who have been involved in either directly navigating one of these processes for access to relief, attempting access to relief, including kind of the clemency process, compassionate release, a motion for appropriate relief, or other forms of relief, or if you've represented someone or have supported a campaign, what are some lessons that you have learned through your advocacy? So welcome you to think about that for a moment, and you're welcome to share. And of course, panelists are also welcome to share. And again, as Tim mentioned, raise your hand and we can take you off mute to share.
One question we have from our Q&A from Rebecca is, are there mental health services specifically for formerly incarcerated people? And that question is for the panelists, if anyone wants to pop in and answer that. But are there any mental health services that are specifically there for formerly imprisoned people?
I think that's a great question, and it's something that I've talked with several people about recently, because there aren't any that I know of, and it's something that I think is so important. Often when I represent people at parole hearings, that's one of the questions that parole commissioners ask, is what kind of mental health treatment and support does this person have set up in their home plan? So I think it's really important when they are weighing whether a person should be released, but there's not, I think right now folks are just required to identify and find something on their own.
Thank you. And any thoughts on the question regarding lessons learned? Anything that any of the panelists would like to share? And we'll see if others in the conversation might be interested in sharing.
Yeah, I think a lesson we have learned is just how hidden these stories and these rights are to many people. Many people are just oblivious to the conditions of prison life. I love the fact that Jake said that there is no rehabilitation in prison. I mean, there is no structure that truly speaks to any rehabilitation, and many people have a somewhat of a theoretical or maybe somewhat of a Hollywood understanding of prison life, until you actually talk with someone and they share with you just some of the things the inhumane ways that they are treated. I think that's what I've learned over these few years of advocating for Charles, as well as listening to other stories, just the overall conditions of the prison life and how we need more voices talking and speaking up.
We have a raised hand from Wanda. I'm just going to go ahead and unmute you right here if you'd like to ask a question to the panelists.
Yes. My name is Wanda Cox. I'm in Lexington, North Carolina, and I serve with Pastor Suber on the Advocates for Charles McNear group. I am the fortunate one who has been able to visit with Charles on a regular basis. I'm in my 4th year of visiting at least every 2 weeks, having numerous conversations. And the one thing that has shocked me as a layperson in the community with no real experience in this, it was just a horrible story that tugged at my heartstrings. But I am shocked at the level of retaliation that the prisons can do to an individual who's incarcerated when people on the outside try to help them. Just since we have been involved in Charles, with Charles, he has been moved, he has been harassed, he has been persecuted inside the walls of prison. And I truly believe it is because of the work and the publicity we have gathered for him on the outside. Now, I discussed this with him at great length. How hard do you want us to push? How much longer do you want us to keep holding up your name when you're getting this kind of pushback? And he says to keep going. There's nothing his exact words are, what can they do to me that they haven't already done? But I, as an individual, find it shocking that the North Carolina prison system will retaliate against an incarcerated individual when they try to receive help on the outside. So I do think going forward, whatever groups that we can gather together to do this, the public, I use myself as an example, the public needs to be made more aware of what happens inside these walls of prison for those who are incarcerated.
I'll just thank you, Wanda, for that comment. I think that's unfortunately absolutely true, and part of the problems with working in prisons and trying to advocate for clients and loved ones who are incarcerated is that it's sort of a black box, right? There's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of transparency. And when clients or loved ones are explaining these dystopian experiences that they're having, trying to get to the truth of that and trying to get some justice, even just trying to get information, is really, really hard. And trying to figure out where to go to advocate, right? There's North Carolina Prisoner Legal Services and organizations like the Justice Center and Southern Coalition that get a lot of letters from folks. It does raise the kind of question about who are the accountable actors, right? Who do you go to? You know, the incoming governor is going to appoint somebody to be the head of Department of Adult Correction. You know, these are the kinds of issues that elected officials have some control over. So it is important to remember that won't change the culture, but starting to change the culture from the top down is really important.
We have another question in the chat. Question is, how is it ethical for the incarcerated people in North Carolina to be charged for everything, including phone calls, snacks, toiletries, and funds given to them? Very unfortunate, but prevailing question for sure.
It's not ethical. I mean, you look at what people get charged for a medical visit, a phone call, or a piece of snack food, and it's outrageous. It's also the kind of thing that it doesn't have to be that way, right? We see this in county jails. Jails do the same thing, and the prison system choose to provide services in these ways, and it shouldn't be that. There's an amazing group called Worth Rises, WORTHRISES.org. That is a national group that is very focused on these particular kinds of issues about the sort of profits over people and things like that that pervade the prison system and the jails. So it's a long way of saying I don't have a good argument for why it's ethical. It's permissible, but also is the kind of thing where we've seen it at the county level, where every once in a while you might get an elected sheriff who decides to change the approach to these kinds of services provided.
Thank you so much. And are there other lessons learned that anyone would like to share?
Well, I think one lesson is it really does take all of us. It takes people pushing the limits of what the law allows. It takes people within the prisons understanding what is possible. It takes advocates for individuals. And then it takes folks like Reverend Subert to get out there and be public for individuals and involve communities and educate communities. So to me, the thing that I'm most appreciative of today is to have just this group of lots of different kind of people who are interested and want to help people that are in prison get out.
I would just second what Chris just said, and knowing that, just for example, when it comes to the power of clemency, that between now and December 31st, we're going to see Governor Cooper perhaps grant clemency and commute some sentences. I would speculate that it might be unprecedented compared to years past, which is really, really important. And it's going to also be completely dissatisfying because too many people are going to be left behind. But I think that to take that positive and build off of it, so that if we can make a lot of strides in 2024 and have this be the most productive year in terms of clemency, I think we're starting to get that traction. And it's again, like Chris said, it's because of all the things that are happening at once, pushing against the system, lifting up stories, and holding up these names of folks who need to be coming home.
Thank you for that point. And just to add to that, for anyone who does not know, Governor Cooper has already done 2 rounds of clemency this year. And so that also is somewhat unprecedented. And so the opportunity for additional people to get access to relief through clemency is really important, and hope that folks are able to continue to advocate. Also, I have one other question just for the broader group before we move to an opportunity to take action. And that is, if based on what you heard today, maybe you are not as familiar, what is something that maybe surprised you or something that's very interesting to you that you may continue to follow up on? And I also see that the poll just popped up as well. So I guess with that, since that just popped up, so it looks like most people are most familiar with compassionate release and clemency, and not so much with the extended limits of confinement and motions for appropriate relief. Thank you. Yeah, so Tim just also dropped that question in the chat, but anything you learned today that surprised you, that was of interest to you, something that you might take with you, you're welcome to share it in the chat or out loud. And while folks are thinking, I'll just ask if any of our panelists have any kind of final comments that you would like to share with the group.
Yes. One, thanks definitely to the Justice Center. Of course, thank you to Krista and Jake for their wealth of knowledge and experience. I'm an advocate, but if it wasn't for that knowledge, I wouldn't know what to advocate for. So definitely thanks to both of them and the work that they do. But I share the same thoughts as Krista that it takes all of us working together in our prospective areas to ensure that justice, um, our concerns are heard, one, and that justice is fulfilled. So I encourage those who have a heart for this work to join. To join in a advocacy group. There are several advocacy groups, small and large, across the state. There's several names that we do not know. Um, I will say Charles McNair is one of the lucky ones for his story to be heard. Because there's several names, as Keisha probably will lift up several names later on, that we don't know. We don't know their stories, but they're sitting in prisons across the state, hoping and praying that someone will have compassion for them and seek to lift their name and fight for them. That's my words.
We have another question from the Q&A. It's asking, is there a program in which Representative Maury is involved with other colleagues to do general sentencing review? And how does this group work into the system, or does it?
That's the Juvenile Sentencing Review Board. And that's something that came out of the Task Force for Racial Equity in the Criminal Justice System, that was chaired by Justice Anita Earls and then Attorney General Josh Stein. And based on the information that was given to the TREC, they made a recommendation to Governor Cooper, who then signed an executive order creating the Juvenile Sentencing Review Board. And so they review sentences for people who were convicted as children. So anyone who is convicted to this, it's maybe more than 20 years, long sentences, but they were convicted under the age of 18. They have been reviewing cases for a couple of years now and have made recommendations to Governor Cooper for clemency. So it's sort of an added review for clemency petitions for this certain group of people.
Thank you. And Tim has just shared information, more information on the Juvenile Sentencing Review Board in the chat. So anything else, I guess, from Jake or Kristen before we move into our action? Thank you all so much. So I would like to turn now to Reverend Stuber's ask that folks who are able and interested reach out to the governor's office to uplift Charles McNair. We do have that phone number available, but I wanted to turn it back over to Reverend Stuber really briefly just to share a little bit about what folks might typically say and how people might engage in that action right now.
Yes, thank you so much. So, what we instruct anyone to do, and also we have postcards as well. If you want to reach out to us, Justice for Charles McNair, if you reach out to us, we can also get you, mail you some postcards that already has the messaging on it. Only you will have to do, quite naturally, is put your name, your address, and a stamp and send it off as well. But when we ask people to call and write emails, we like to keep it simple. That we demand or we request or ask you, Governor Cooper, that you sign the petition or clemency for Charles McNair. That we keep it very simple and tight, because what we want is really to start a trend. And we've already had some trends out there already. But we really want to continue those trends, and pretty much for the emails and the messages and the phones get so tied up that really just becomes insane, and we force them to act. So a couple of things that you can do quite naturally. You can call the governor office at 919-814-2000 and enter five. As always, we encourage people that don't get discouraged if the secretary kind of shoves you off or say that, okay, we already know. We ask you to continue to call and at least leave a message for them as well. Also, you can send email at roy.cooper@nc.gov. You can do that as well. Also, we know on the governor's website there is a request for a meeting with the governor. Of course, we have not been successful in requesting that meeting, but you may be successful in requesting that meeting. And we ask that if you get a meeting with him to contact us. My number is 803-673-6548. You can contact me directly and say, hey, Rev. Super, I got a meeting with the governor. And then, of course, I will contact Wanda Cox, who's already up here. I don't know if she could come off of mute and share her number if she wants. But you can contact either one of us, and definitely we will definitely put in our schedules, and we'll make sure we meet you up there to meet with the governor. But above all of that, about the phone calls, writing emails, requesting a meeting with the governor, social media. We've learned that social media is a powerful tool. Everyone has, or at least most people have, a Facebook page. So we've learned that anywhere the governor is, anywhere we see pictures, he's doing something, even something like lighting a Christmas tree. We've made it our business to go on the page and write something as relates to Charles McNair. Say, hey, it'd be good for Charles McNair to come home so he can light his Christmas tree. So that's how we continue to have Charles McNair's name continue to be raised in our communities and courts throughout the state.
Thank you. So we've got 2 minutes left in our hour. Looks like you can take 1 minute and decide which action may feel appropriate for you. Tim has shared the petition for Charles McNair in the chat. There is the contact information for Governor Cooper's office to make a phone call or to do an email. Understand that you may not be able to do this all in one or 2 minutes, but wanted to make sure that we pause and have an opportunity for it. So I will actually just pause for 30 seconds, give folks a chance to decide what action they might take, at the very least, continue to follow Justice for Charles McNair to see what they are doing as they continue to uplift advocacy for him. As was named, he has been incarcerated now for 45 years. So we'll pause for 30 seconds and then we'll wrap up. Swanda, did you want to say something else?
I was just going to be happy to share my number if that will help in any way. It is 336-870-9490. And between Pastor Suber and myself, I am sure that we can find it in our schedules to stand up for Charles anywhere, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining today. We have 2 more conversations, one next week called In the Wake of Disaster on the 18th, talking about how we think about relief for folks who are incarcerated and returning home in the midst of disasters such as Hurricane Helene. We'll have another one in January. If you registered for this, you are registered for the others and can join us. We'll continue to work on our technical side of all of this, and you will get an email from us with the resources and information shared during today's call. Thank you again so much for joining.
Thank you, Keisha.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you.